is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path.
First reading. A reading from the first book of Samuel, chapter 17, verses 32 to 33, 37, and 40 to 51. David spoke to Saul, "Let your majesty not lose courage. I am at your service to go and fight this Philistine." But Saul answered David, "You cannot go up against this Philistine and fight with him, for you are only a youth, while he has been a warrior from his youth." David continued, "The Lord who delivered me from the claws of the lion and the bear will also keep me safe from the clutches of this Philistine." Saul answered David, "Go, the Lord will be with you." Then staff in hand, David selected 5 smooth stones from the wadi and put them in the pocket of his shepherd's bag. With his sling also ready to hand, he approached the Philistine. With his shield bearer marching before him, the Philistine also advanced closer and closer to David. When he had sized David up and seen that he was youthful and ruddy and handsome in appearance, the Philistine held David in contempt. The Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come against me with a staff?" Then the Philistine cursed David by his gods and said to him, "Come here to me, and I will leave your flesh for the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." David answered him, "You come against me with sword and spear and scimitar, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel that you have insulted. Today the Lord shall deliver you into my hand. I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will leave your corpse and the corpses of the Philistine army for the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Thus the whole land shall learn that Israel has a God. All this multitude too shall learn that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord's, and he shall deliver you into our hands." The Philistine then moved to meet David at close quarters, while David ran quickly toward the battle line, in the direction of the Philistine. David put his hand into the bag and took out a stone, hurled it with the sling, and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone embedded itself in his brow, and he fell prostrate on the ground. Thus David overcame the Philistine with sling and stone. He struck the Philistine mortally and did it without a sword. Then David ran and stood over him. With the Philistine's own sword, which he drew from its sheath, he dispatched him and cut off his head. The word of the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Mark, chapter 3, verse 1 to 6. Jesus entered the synagogue. There was a man there who had a withered hand. They watched Jesus closely to see if he would cure him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. He said to the man with the withered hand, "Come up here before us." Then he said to the Pharisees, "Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath rather than to do evil, to save life rather than to destroy it?" But they remained silent, looking around at them with anger and grieved at their hardness of heart. Jesus said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately took counsel with the Herodians against him to put him to death. The Gospel of the Lord.
My dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, having sent 10 plagues upon the land of Egypt, God made Pharaoh to send Israelites away from the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh at last decided to set Israelites free, since 10 plagues were sent upon the land of Egypt. My dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, even though Pharaoh made them to depart from the land of Egypt, we see how the troops of Pharaoh pursued these Israelites while they were on a journey towards the promised land. And when Israelites reached the Red Sea, they saw the troops, the chariots of Pharaoh were coming after them. And Moses, he took his staff and divided the Red Sea, and he made Israelites to walk along the dry land. And having reached the other side of the Red Sea, again Moses took his staff and he placed it before the Red Sea, and then the water level of the Red Sea became normal as it was earlier. Dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, having seen what God did in and through Moses, the Egyptians, they were discussing among themselves, they were telling themselves, God is fighting against us. God has stood on the side of Israelites. Therefore, our chariots, our troops, and our military power, they become nothing in front of the power of God. My dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, in today's first reading, which is taken from the first book of Samuel, we see how the Philistine giant Goliath is defeated by King David while he was still a lad. What did King David take with him? He took only his staff and 5 stones that he picked from the brook. With these 5 stones and staff, he defeated the giant Philistine Goliath. My dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, when King David approached Goliath, Goliath despised him, saying, "Am I a dog that you approach to me with a staff? I am going to kill you, and your body shall be savored by the birds of the air and the beasts of the land." My dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, when Goliath despised King David replied him in return, saying, "You come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you with the power of God." King David relied on and depended on God's power. That is why he could defeat that giant Philistine Goliath, who has been a warrior since his childhood. My dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, those who trust in chariots, sword, troops, and military power, they always lose their power at the sight of God. If we rely on God, if we rely on God's power, God is going to save our lives from dangers. Therefore, instead of having trust in money, power, and military power, let us trust in God's power. Let us rely on God's power so that we may be able to experience the real presence of God in our lives. Amen.